But there's a school of thought which says if you have virtualization or a hypervisor, you're on the cloud. Well, that's not true. To be precise, virtualization is a necessary but not a sufficient condition to be on the cloud. We're not trying to belittle virtualization here, not at all. We're trying to get attention to something else. We have a next speaker here, Mr. Dylan Morrison, who's going to talk about 10 domains to IT as a service, how ready you are for the cloud. Mr. Morrison is the APAC Data Center and Cloud Director of Sales Operation at Cisco. He's responsible for helping Cisco's top enterprise clients transform their data center environments. That includes the next generation unified data center deployments, infrastructure as a service, and automation. I welcome Mr. Morrison on the stage.
Thank you everyone for your time. As I was introduced, Dylan Morrison is my name. I've been at Cisco now for 14, nearly 15 years. Oh, so I went too early. So what I'd like to do and cover off is really break it down, and cloud computing is something that I've started to evolve into from the data center perspective at Cisco. I was at Cisco when we first got into the data center at the back end, so where we got into an iSCSI router probably 12 years ago and started to move on the storage and in the backside of the data center and not just on that networking at the front end. And I've seen it really transform within our customers. But it's been the same challenges that we've faced, and it was excellent, the session just before. We can't just do what we've done for the last 10, 15, 20 years. We have to change how we actually approach it. Things are coming at such a mass and such a scale at us, we want to try and leverage it and really actually take full advantage. I had an interesting flight over last night, so if I seem a little bit tired, I had about 2 hours sleep last night, so my plane running down the runway in Singapore decided that it wasn't a good idea to take off for some reason and screeched to a halt and skidded along, and they got us off and said there was a bad steering on the plane. So luckily we weren't in the air, and we got to change it a few hours later. But also overnight, Australia's just become the world champions in cricket again. So yes, there's two places I like because I love my sports, cricket and rugby. India, great to talk to an Indian about cricket. Not always fun for us because a lot of times we're not winning. And also New Zealand for rugby, and again, it's the same thing. But we've carried on our winning streak. The Australian women are now the world champions. It's probably the only world champion cricket cup we're going to get for a while. I think one of them looks a bit like Pup, as he's known. Michael Clark looks a bit like one of those ladies. So, it is a successful thing for us last night. But let's get into it. So what I thought we'd talk about is really starting to break down the data center. And I think when you look at cloud, and I deal a lot with VMware, Citrix, Microsoft, a lot of the software vendors around the hypervisor space, I talk to a lot of customers that came from the server or application environment, and cloud to them is about the hypervisor. Yet, without all the pieces of the puzzle put in correctly, you do hinder your adoption to cloud. You do mean that you slow down the ability to take up the fantastic opportunity that cloud offers our organisations. Whether it be security, whether it be access for the network, there's lots of different areas. So I want to just take a small step in simplifying how it all goes together, that we can start to look at a holistic view when we're building these data centres to be ready for the cloud. So why do we need the data centres? The data centres themselves are now getting a lot of visibility in the organisations. I used to look after a lot of the banks in Australia as my key accounts. And every time there was an outage on the bank through their ATM machines or applications, guess what? It was an outage in the data centre. And that all of a sudden became very visible for the CIO, for the CEO, on what's happening in the data centre, and we get a little spike in investment in the IT budget to try and rectify some of the challenge, and then it drops off again. But I think it's that constant battle to highlight what the data centre really is. It's the heart, it's the soul in a lot of organisation of their business. It's supporting the business process for them being a company and where they make their money and do their research. Another example that I've seen is in the airline industry. A lot of Australians go away on a certain weekend, long weekend of the year, And there was one airline organisation that had an outage in their booking system. That was the whole long weekend they couldn't book and they had to start doing it manually. You had families sitting in the airport not going on their fantastic family holiday. Guess what? I don't think any one of those families would now go back to that airline. They've lost customers and very hard to attract them back. That came from an outage in the data centre and their system and their applications that are running out of there. So again, we can't belittle what's happening in the data centre. We need to keep focusing and driving that message back to the business, but we need to be communicating on a regular basis. It is about the application that run the businesses. So what is the business environment like today? Now, I think I live in Singapore now and look after a lot of companies across Asia Pacific. I came from Sydney and a lot of the organisations and everyone said, oh, how lucky was Australia? We got through without getting impacted too heavily by the GFC. Well, Australia's actually started to slow down. We've had a couple of interest rate decreases and we're going to get a few more to come. So it really is slowing, stalled or declining growth in a lot of cases. Rising costs equals stagflation. Now that picture, for those that don't know, is hangover. I thought about when I was thinking about stagflation, the stag do. And these stag do's always start off a little bit fun, but things go a little bit wrong at times and aren't so enjoyable. That's a bit like our environment as an IT point of view. We start off managing these things, they start off enjoyable, they start getting out of control. And they're very hard to rein back in once they're out of control. A bit like the stag do, and I'd hate to say that a few that I've been on are a little bit in that scenario. So how's the CIO and the VP of infrastructure doing? If I look at their environment, it's not an easy task. You look at the growth that they're managing, you look at the budget cuts that everyone's getting, and let's face it, Cisco, we are no different to any organisation. We go through the same thing from marketing cuts in investments to budget cuts for how we run our IT, but you need to be smarter about how you actually leverage the tools and the environments out there to overcome these 10%. Be innovative. And that's what it's all about with things like cloud, and this we'll start to talk about. Increased security risks. Well, I think the presentation before was exact. I look at that and it resonates so well. I remember when at Cisco we were going out and talking about the internet. And we had these presentations from our friends from IBSG, and it was all about getting your business ready for the internet. We went out to lots of large organisations and they would sit there and say, there is no way I'm going to give anyone access to the internet in my organisation. That's crazy. Yet, what they've actually realised is the productivity gains by giving people access to information at their fingertips, ready to go. Imagine now if you gave them access to information plus applications at their fingertips to really start to drive productivity. That's where you get the gains, and that's where you start to overcome some of these challenges. Tech-savvy employees. I've got my smartphone. I know there was an Apple up here before, and when you put it up, I was going to say it was a Samsung, just to be cheeky. But, there is no difference now, and in the devices, they're everywhere. iPads. My 4-year-old's on my iPad telling me things take too long to download. Yeah, it's only this small application that takes about 30 seconds. So they are very impatient kids, and they're very good at technology. That's finding its way into the business. And how do we actually leverage that in our environments and the data centre? Increasing volumes of data we know about. And then the last tag, it's always on the back of everyone's mind, is be more green. If you look at the board, we all do the corporate social responsibility. It's about being more green and helping give back to the environment and to our society. And those are things that aren't easy to achieve as a CIO. They seem to be pushing against each other a lot of the cases. So the good news, and we spoke about a lot of them, high-level sort of environments now or actual, I suppose, developments, cloud, and then some of the services below. Big data we spoke about today, which was a great one because a friend in my condos from IBM spoke a lot about Watson, so it is real and I saw it live now. VXI is what Cisco terms more around the VDI, but the delivery of VDI end to end. Not just about the client, but how do I deliver that from the data center, across the network, using quality of service in a secure fashion out to a client. If you can do those sorts of things, the client will actually, the uptake of these sort of technologies will start to increase. A lot of time people don't take the uptake of new technology is because it's not on par with what they're already doing today. As soon as you bring it up to a level of quality that's equal, if not better, you'll start to see a change in people's behaviour. BYOD and converged infrastructure is something that Cisco has driven very heavily in our approach to the market itself. So the other question is, are the current data centres ready to embrace these technology changes? I'd say no in most cases. I'd say no because people are still going down a very siloed approach and not looking at the problems as a holistic view. If I look at it just from a networking point of view, I'll fail. If I look at it just at an application or a hypervisor point of view, I will fail. You need to actually start looking at these things as a holistic view. And as you start to do this, you'll start to build an architecture and an approach that can start to leverage and adopt some of these things around the cloud. You might take a small step and then start to increase that adoption. But you have to start changing the way you actually approach a lot of these environments. So, the data centers, it is a bit like the game, Jenga, where if I pull the wrong block out, it all comes crashing down. If I think about the application and dependencies of multiple applications on each other, I pull one application out, guess what? A whole flurry of other applications go crashing down. And it's not different in the data center. So again, changing how we actually start to build these applications, how we build this environment to be more resilient, more agile, and be able to be, I suppose, more of an IT as a service sort of model. So I standardise on some of my environments and I start to use more, I suppose, like a service profile for a service. And I have pools of resources. I start to pull and throw them back when need be. This starts to give you greater efficiency and flexibility and standardisation that now you can start to adopt out into these other environments. So the data centres must go through transformation, and here's a good example of reason why. As a user, we now have the best opportunity to go out and acquire our own service using a credit card. AWS has proven that. It's very easy to go out and get a service straight away. I can sign up, get different offerings. I see a catalogue, service level agreement. I go and self-service, put my order in myself when I need it for my development, maybe a new application, and then I get all the details of billing. Now, I don't know how many people have actually gone on and actually looked at AWS and acquired a service itself, but it's extremely straightforward, and there's more organisations that are going out and offering this. If I'm a developer inside the organisation or a business unit that has a small application, I'm not going to wait around for 2 months, 3 months to get a service that I could do it nearly instantaneously. The way for businesses now to actually be more competitive is not just cost saving, it's about agility. It's about bringing new technology, new products, new services to market before my competitors do, and try to capture markets. These are the sorts of things around cloud computing that it gives you. It's not just about the cost savings. And there was a big discussion probably 4 or 5 years ago around virtualization. It's about going from 100 servers to 10 servers. That was what all the business cases were designed around virtualization. Now you go to talk to most businesses, it's not about the cost saving, that's nice, but it's about the agility that virtualization gives to the business. It's about the resilience the virtualization gives to the business. So, things have changed. This is why, and I agree, with the presentation before, cloud computing is here to stay, and it is changing what we do. We need to work out how we adapt and actually take full advantage of it. We go through that transformation journey, and I'm sure you all have been through presentations. It is a simple sort of picture to paint out from a journey point of view, but really sitting there and thinking about truly where your business is today, Have I looked at how I automate within my organisation, have consistent governance and automate my tools to drive efficiency into my organisation and my data centre? Have I started to implement what a private cloud is? And we'll talk a little bit later on about that. Am I getting ready to be able to take full advantage of hybrid clouds? Have I got my foundation ready in my own environment? We talk about IT as a service and CFOs go, we need to go to the cloud, it's cheaper. We don't even have a starting point in a lot of cases. What is the cost of my service? Start off with what services do I offer to my business? Then look at what is the true cost of delivering that service, SLAs that need to be applied to it that I need to meet. Then you've got a starting point to be able to go out to market and understand where you're actually positioned and is it the right thing to do. CIsco ourselves, we're a very strong adopter of cloud. We run a very large private cloud environment today where we all, as internal users, can jump online and grab a server today to run up and put any sort of application on it. We can do that for a VDI session as well. Our organisation, if we can't be more competitive than the external clouds, we will not do it internally. We will use external clouds, and we do that today, where we're not more competitive than externally. Because we've got a very strong model around how we calculate, manage the true cost of each of the services. And IT is more about delivering a service now than managing and maintaining the infrastructure. So what's something else that we've done different? The converged infrastructure. CIsco also saw we needed to do things like computing differently. So CIsco looked at the x86 market, and to get scale and simplification, we thought, what if we had on one side, here where we had the traditional legacy blade systems, lots of connectivity, multiple networks, multiple management. What if we could take away a lot of that complexity and simplify that into an x86 computing system? Treat it more like workloads and not talk about servers, CPUs, but talk about workloads and where they need to be. Do it as a stateless computing environment so I can bring a server up and down, and it doesn't matter what the server was meant to be called before because it's stateless. It's all about the application talking to just a piece of CPU and memory. That's been able to now help adopt larger capacity for cloud, for VDI and other environments. So we've looked at how we change and transform in the data center itself. So imagine having hundreds and hundreds of blades on a single IP address. Managing this thing on a single IP address across multiple data centers. That's the sort of thing we're talking about for cloud as well. You want to distribute, you want to be able to manage it simply on an easy management environment or tool. Other areas that CIsco looked to drive, and just give you a bit of feeling around the actual infrastructure itself, is around these converged infrastructures, taking the complexity out. And again, it was a bit like that game earlier on. The more I have lots of different components, lots of different people's fingers and actual input into these environments, becomes costly and complex, and then start to become more unstable. And then as you start to want to change, it becomes more difficult to change as you start going down. So where we've actually started to look at these integrated converged stacks, our first one was vBlock with VMC and VMware. Other ones around with NetApp and other vendors was taking some of that complexity out, having a common building block that we then have application providers and then start to drive out to the cloud. It's very consistent on our approach to the actual data centers. A few other things in there. VMDC is a multi-tenanted cloud environment. So again, looking at how we build in multi-tenancy right from the top of the stack all the way through, and a few other areas in there. So what is CIsco's vision around cloud? And what's interesting is it is a world of many clouds, and we spoke in the last session a lot about it's not one cloud. And coming from a networking vendor, this is probably the best thing that's ever happened to us. It's like the internet all over again. It's actually putting some relevance back into the important piece of connectivity, security, and being able to diagnose things as they go through these complex environments. Now, let's not, I suppose, belittle. Cloud is still complex. It's not something that's just simple and straightforward and plug all these pieces together. it is a complex beast. But if you understand and you can actually start to have visibility and management, things become a lot easier and clearer. What we're in a unique position is it's about the supply and the demand side. One thing Cisco is very lucky is we help to build the cloud environments. If I look at some of the large clouds around in the world, Cisco's been at the forefront with those providers building those clouds. In some cases, it's on the compute. In other cases, it's back in the networking, security, and other aspects of the cloud providers. One of mine from Australia, my hometown, was Telstra, a very large cloud provider having great success in the local market because they have a few key attributes that actually appeal to the market. They own the network, they have control of the network, and they build a very easy-to-use cloud service that appeals to a lot of both mid-market but also enterprise environments. We help that connectivity between the enterprise, what do you want to see out of a cloud provider, and what can you provide as a cloud provider as well, which I think is critical. And lastly, not only just building the platform, it's about some of the services that Cisco deliver as well. So I hear a lot of people ask, well, what's Cisco doing in the cloud? And this is more just a bit of a high-level overview of what's our role in the cloud today, both from building the platform, but some of the actual services, whether it's WebEx collaboration, security in the cloud, and also network management in the cloud as a product, as software as a service. Interesting, some of the research around some of the applications, the most likely to move to cloud. I seem to see a lot of research and things chop and change around, but definitely a lot of these areas that you could look at of different applications that you could start with. Maybe go through some of your common applications, some of the smaller ones that probably have less risk, less visibility. How can you start to take a piece of that to actually look at the cloud? I mean, Cisco, our CRM, we're one of the biggest users of Salesforce.com. So there's lots of different avenues you can actually look to adopt to the cloud. But I think you need to start somewhere and start to piece out those services itself. So the one area, hopefully giving you a bit of a picture around the cloud itself, where does Cisco play in the cloud? And it was probably about a month or two ago, I was chatting with one of our consulting engineers inside Cisco, and he had this concept of domain 10, or the 10 domains of a data center. And once he painted this picture, it really did resonate for myself, and all the conversations I'm having with customers is it gets isolated to certain pockets within the organisation. It gets isolated to the VMware group or the networking group, and everyone seems to be an enemy of each other because they don't want to give control over of their different departments and functionality. But when you actually break it down into these 10 domains, it actually starts to simplify. How do I go? Where do I go? What's my first step? Where do I start this journey for cloud and adopting and the new world, new age or transformed data center? And hopefully, as we go through, it'll become clear. First step, of course, start with infrastructure, facilities. Are your facilities ready for the actual growth, for the density of some of the new designs that people are putting in their infrastructure? 40 gig, 100 gig. Think about the power and the hotspots you start to see in your data centers. It might not be a huge increase in the actual power consumed of the overall data center, but how it's dispersed in the data center changes. So looking at just the basic power cooling and base or racks, up into the compute and storage and networking layer, we're now converging those together. That compute platform that Cisco has brought to market is a converged infrastructure. Your storage, your compute, and your network are all on a single system. We start to get efficiencies in there and open all these systems up to APIs and XML interfaces to take advantage of the next layers up. The virtualization and abstraction layer, break it down and start to look at how do you start to look at virtualization. Maybe not just VMware, but look at Microsoft, look at Citrix. Start to look at multiple options that you have in your armory. And again, a bit of a horses for courses. I've got customers that use Hyper-V for certain applications or certain environments. I've got other environments that I use VMware. But then on top of that is start to look at how do you look into the networking layer within the hypervisor, security, and other aspects. So again, looking at that as a single domain, building out a model around it, but not forgetting that layer one or the domain one. And then as we start to move up into the automation and orchestration side of things. So the third domain is around the automation and orchestration. And then we start to look at how do we automate and orchestrate across all of the environments.
It's running out of time. I thought I'd
Okay, no, that's all right. I won't ask questions. Into the user portal. Next step is the domain 4 is around the user portal. Having that storefront is how do you develop the storefront ready for users to use? How do you make it easier for them to get into the storefront? And that's where Amazon really did a fantastic job because it was their core business, is having that storefront. Fifth one is around service catalog. What are you actually going to service and give to your users to actually get access? Some people want to open that access up and some want to bring that back into a more controlled environment. And then financial servicing or management. Do I want to do chargeback, bill back, show back? But it's a good way to actually know that you've actually managed your environment. The platform, level 7, around being able to do platform as a service. Applications, software as a service, and different applications. So understanding what applications you are looking to put to the cloud, which ones will you do internally, which ones will you take advantage externally. Security and compliance, making sure your security models work across not just your environment, but externally out into the cloud. And lastly, around the process and governance. These things need to change and are critical to be able to adopt into those environments. So if I look at it, you can actually take a quick, I suppose, assessment around where you're at with that whole matrix and the whole data center capability. I strongly advise you to actually start to piece it up and look at holistically when you look to cloud, because I think at times people box themselves in and actually limit themselves to be able to adapt to the cloud and to the data center, whether they haven't done a complete job on the compliance, security, or even in the infrastructure itself. So I'd like to thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your insightful and entertaining presentation. Please accept this small token of appreciation from our side.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.